fans, this is Kurt DeVille with Counterpunched Boxing News, and I have some new news concerning Oleksandr Usyk, Daniel Dubois, Faceoff review, okay? And I did this live with the people that caught me live. Appreciate you guys that stopped in. And something I have to make an individual video for was the contents of what went on in that show. And the surprising thing, first off, is Daniel Dubois' temperament when they asked him about the punch that he received from Oleksandr Usyk. And it's interesting because the way he responded, it's almost as though he kind of snapped, because he was like, oh, that fucking shit is in the past. You know, everybody's bringing up, I know what you're trying to do, or I don't know what you mean by that, you know, and you're just doing your job. And I'm thinking like, well, wait a minute, you know, that's in the past, isn't it? So we're just going to move on from that. You know, he got pissed off. And it was one of those things where it's like, well, wait a minute, that's kind of a, you know, exclamation mark. That's something to really pay attention to. And, you know, with the counter, I'm like, listen, why are you getting so angry about what that man asked you? And it dawned on me, nobody has ever asked Daniel Dubois that question before. This was the first time. And I don't really even know who the guy was. I know he's well known. He's a commentator for DAZN, you know what I mean? But I just don't know his name. But shout out to him, whoever he is, shout out to him, because he asked a question that obviously, I don't know if I know he meant to ask it because, you know, it was his interview with the two champions, you know, Dubois and Usyk, but no one asked Danny Dubois that before, because here's the reality of it. If he said it did hurt, that meant he had a problem with his chin. If he said it didn't hurt, he would have a problem with his mentality. And he didn't really even want to go which way. And I'm thinking to myself, just thinking back, like, okay, well, what and how could he explain that? You know what I mean? Because if it didn't hurt him, he could have said, I took a knee because I didn't no longer want to fight. Well, who the hell wants to see a guy, and who wants to see that again? Because if that's what you did, Daniel, it's hard to convince people that you've changed against the same person. See, what we've witnessed is Dubois manhandling the last three opponents. You know what I mean? Jarrell, then Philip, then Anthony. You know, and a lot of people have said, you know what, that's enough to prove to us that he overcame adversity due to pressure and punching power and all that. But this Daniel has nothing to do with the Daniel before, because he can't defend himself against a person that he said he was in a dark place. Now, the dark place comment is that comment. I always wondered, what the hell does that mean? It would have been spot on, 100% perfect if that commentator, that interviewer, would have asked him, hey, Daniel, when you said you were in a dark place, because that's the only place I think Daniel could go, is say I was in a dark place at that time. Well, what the hell was going on with you? Because if you were in that darker place, again, if it was personal, spiritual, physical, right, you shouldn't have been fighting. So yeah, you know, and that was the crazy thing, you know. Moving on though, I don't want to keep harping on that. They asked Oleksandr Usyk about the low blow round 5. And Oleksandr Usyk was like, listen, you know, I got hit in a shot. It hurt. He's not the hardest puncher that I've ever faced, so it wasn't that. But, you know, he hit me in a place where, you know, it hurt because it was ruled a foul. But then the interviewer asked, hey, would you have got up? And he was like, yeah. It would have been difficult, as he stated, but he would have got up. He would have found a way to get up. And something about Usyk shows me he would have. You know what I mean? Even though that would have been so controversial, it would have been more controversial if the ref would have ruled it a legal shot. You know what I mean? It's just, bow, you got hit with a foul, and then you took your time to regain yourself, and the referee told you to take more time, so you took more time, and then the rest of the fight convened, and then he, stopped Daniel Dubois in the 9th round. So, that's one way, but a more interesting, difficult way would be him getting hit with a shot that was ruled it was legal, and he had to fight through it because he was going to go down anyway. So he had to get up and then survive the rest of the round. And the question you ask yourself, would he have been able to do that with that type of pain? So, that was very interesting. But I think Usyk in that regard, from round 9 versus round 5, Usyk actually answered that a lot better. Now, moving forward, Daniel Dubois, he was asked, like, hey, what are you going to do to beat him this time? Are you going to be front foot forward, and you're going to use more aggression, and you're going to throw more punches? And Daniel Dubois was like, yeah. And I disagree with that, because I was like, listen, that just shows an experience on what to say and what not to say. And versus, he was, you don't tell anyone what you're planning to do. That's a part of your game plan. They know he was going to be aggressive, but certain things were specific. Like, hey, I'm going to be front foot dominant. That means you're going to be attacking at will, and you're letting people know pretty much a portion of your game plan, which Team Usyk has to be an idiot not to know that already, to be fair. But the experience in how you explain that, or refuse to explain what you're going to do, makes more sense. Don't give no one anything to work with, okay? Because versus when they asked Oleksandr Usyk, it was just like, we'll see. I'm not going to tell you what I'm going to do. I'm not going to tell you any of my tactics and my game plan. What the fuck would I do that for? Only a moron would do that, right? But I think it was set up for Daniel not to really pay attention to what he did and how he answered, because it wasn't necessarily negative, but I think it was a bit too much, But I think that Daniel Dubois versus Oleksandr Usyk is going to be a good fight. It was a good face-off. I did enjoy it in its entirety. It was something else that Daniel Dubois did good, and I appreciated it. Last thing. About round 5, he did shut down the Don Charles rally. Because remember, you remember Don Charles saying he conned the referee. He conned the referee. He had the referee thinking he lied to the referee. He conned him. He conned him. Right? And Daniel was like, nah, we're going to shut that shit down. And I appreciate that, because it's like, okay, we're moving past that. You know what I mean? I'm not even going to entertain it. I'm not like, why put my energy into it? And that makes sense. And I think that's a mental advantage, because you got a guy across from you, even if you felt he did something to you, and then you're constantly feeding into that part of time where you felt he did something to you, right? That's draining you. You can't really use that. That's what happened to Deontay Wilder. Deontay Wilder, to this day, thinks Tyson Fury cheated him. And what he did, he wallowed in the energy of the past. Across from Tyson Fury, looking at Tyson Fury, with these hateful intentions, and, the way he looked, the fierce gaze, the gauge of hatred was burning in Wilder. Even though you can tell he fought like he wanted to kill Tyson Fury. He did. The trilogy fight was very, very emotional. But nonetheless, if you let all that go and you focus on the now, you may do better physically, because you're not bound to that particular moment. So Yeah, I'm glad that, Danny Dubois finally put that shit to bed and started to focus on what he has to do in the second fight, besides looking back at the first, which is already over. So yeah, big up for Danny Dubois for that, because I think other people would have harped and wallowed on it, and then they go in there and they get their ass whooped because they're living in the past, because they haven't transferred all and everything to the forefront instead of everything behind them that does not do them any good in the situation in the present. But you guys tell me what you think about this face-off between Oleksandr Usyk and Daniel Dubois. Of course, please subscribe. And you guys been Counterpunch.